to be very truthful with you, Vipin, my consumption of photography is through photo books.
Right.
I don't really consume photography seriously on Instagram. I see what's going on, but I don't think it's a format that's relevant to photography, because it's, when I say that, it's a controversial thing to say, because it started as a photography platform.
Right.
But the detail in an image, or the way an image feels, the printed image to me is where the magic of an image lies. And printing requires effort, it requires curation, it requires a lot of effort. Even when I use a digital camera, it feels like an iPhone now. Like when I'm taking a photograph, it's almost like I recce with it, I look around, I'll shoot with it. But then when I really want to make an image, at least this is the journey I'm on right now,
I go to film.
I go to my medium format, I go to my big Hasselblad. It's cumbersome, it's difficult, it's a pain in the ass. But when I look through that viewfinder, I see a world that I relate to. We sanitize our work, you know? We sanitize it, and then we no longer see life.
Right.
You know, we're seeing shapes and trees and things and that, but we're not seeing humanity. We're not seeing the humanity because we're too frightened of breaching those ethical protocols, or being, you know, invasive, or, you know. And I think they're relevant conversations. I think they're debates that have to happen, but I don't think we should be self-censoring to the extent that we don't practice. Cheers.
Oh, cheers to you, sir. How are you doing, sir? First of all, thank you so much for doing this. It really means a lot to me. And tell me, like, how are you doing? How's life treating you?
It's an honor to be here. Today is a very good day. I've had a lovely 1 kilometer swim, and the whole week has gone in recovering from my wonderful trip to Sri Lanka, and scanning too many negatives, but it's been a lot of fun.
Right.
So it's I'm in a very happy space today.
So Sri Lanka trip, was it for like any commercial work, or like your personal photography?
No, you know, I'll tell you what happened was I had not, you know, it's very interesting. I mean, my last lockdown, it was very hard for me to get out of a lockdown mindset, and I had been on a workshop in Mexico with Alex and Rebecca Webb in 2020 February, right? And after the workshop, I flew to Cuba to meet an old college friend of mine, and I was photographing there and just enjoying whatever after the workshop. It was in a sense, it was a trip of a lifetime. I'd given, you know, I was spending a month traveling and doing this workshop and everything, and then suddenly lockdown was announced while I was in Havana, which was so far away from Bombay. And I'm an OCI holder, so the border was closing, I think 2 or 3 days earlier than for Indian nationals, and I had to rush back to get back just before the borders closed. Literally, I think I had about 8 or 10 hours before the border was closing, and I think I was traumatized, and I've not left the country since. I'd not left India since I hadn't traveled, you know, since since lockdown. I'd made trips within India, but I hadn't gone abroad, and I just had to start somewhere, you know. I had to start and get out of this trauma. I don't know why I was so stuck, you know. But it was nice, because I think that period of those 3 years in the middle really got me time to work on what I was trying to do with my photography, perhaps, or trying to understand what was going on. I managed to get the book done. I managed to get lots of things done, you know, and start other things, but not. But anyway, so that's you know. So
we'll talk about it.
So let me say, you know, so it was a holiday, but my idea of a holiday is quite different from what I tend to sort of wake up at 5 a.m. I'm on the road, sometimes 8-10 hours. I'm exploring, and you know, and then I read. It's my time to be digital detox, and so that's why even on this trip, no digital cameras, nothing. You know, everything no screens, so it was,
Right.
that's my form of relaxation, I guess. So it was very much for my own pleasure, for my own joy. Yeah.
Right. Social media does like take a toll on you after a point, I guess.
I think it depends. I mean, I think as with everything, it's just what your relationship with is with it. It's like it can be anything. It can be anything you want it to be. I think so. It's sort of like what do you want social media to be for you? And yes, it is. There is. I do sometimes ask myself questions like, if I weren't on Instagram, would I exist as a human being? Would I
Right.
even exist? Do I,
Right.
forget as a photographer? I'm saying even as a human being, do
Hmm.
I do I exist if I'm not there?
Right. So how do you use social media for your work? Like, what is your approach?
I've kept it very simple over the years, and it's there are two very distinct sides of me, and one is my commercial role as an advertising filmmaker, right? And that is something I've been doing more than 25 years.
Right.
And it's an incredible craft. It's an incredible journey I've been on over there, and I'm very grateful for what it has given me, because it's actually given me the flexibility and freedom to work photographically in the way I want to, right? However, it's not my personality, right? It's my professional hat, right? So when I'm working for clients, I'm working for their deliverables, for their vision, right? I'm trying, especially in the early years of my career, I was infusing a lot of my own personality into my work. But as that industry has changed and the format's changed, it's more delivering to what the client is asking for and less. I still put bits of me in, but not as much. So in that sense, my social media presence is very personal.
Right.
It isn't professional, it's my personal relationship. It's so I often talk about Instagram being like a public journal for me. I'm very repetitive. I reiterate thoughts that that are always recurring to me, and I often just sort of express how I'm feeling about the things at any particular time. I don't like to get too academic about it, and it's very, very instinctive and very much from my heart. So I don't use it. I also don't use it to curate my work particularly. Though it is helpful sometimes to share things and get a sense of what people are responding to or not, but there's definitely no relationship between sort of likes on a post I make and the value of an image in my eyes,
Right. So it is about, like, you talked about how you use social media for your work, but when it comes to consumption, your personal consumption as well, what kind of do you follow, like, content on Instagram?
Yes, I do, and it's quite challenging because there's obviously a vast amount out there, right? But to be very truthful with you, Vipin, my consumption of photography is through photo books.
Right.
I don't really consume photography seriously on Instagram. I see what's going on, but I don't think it's a format that's relevant to photography, because when I say that, it's a controversial thing to say, because it started as a photography platform. But the detail in an image, or the way an image feels, the printed image to me is where the magic of an image lies. And printing requires effort. It requires curation. It requires a lot of effort to take an image from a digital file or a negative into a printed form and to be consumed is a very mindful and complex process. That is where I consume, or let's say, for lack of a better word, evaluate or judge photography in a sense,
Right. And do you think digital images are like electronic dust? There's a famous dialogue from this movie that you really like, Kodachrome.
Kodachrome, yes.
I
Digital
watched that
Dust.
movie for like 4 or 5 times. I really love that movie.
Fabulous. Fantastic film.
Amazing.
Digital Dust. I think, look, I have these slightly weird, not weird. It's just that, look, I think everyone has to have a personal perspective on things, and
Right.
I I hover around between different things, but the only thing that I've never really managed to embrace, and there's a reason for it, I've never really managed to embrace the iPhone photograph, you know,
Right. Okay.
or using the iPhone as a way. And people do it brilliantly. People
Right.
use it brilliantly. I have not been able to. It falls out of my hand.
Hmm.
Things drop. I don't know how to use it. I just don't know how to use it, you
Hmm.
know. So because I don't know how to use it, I get frustrated with its form, you know.
Right.
I It's gotten to the point even, Vipin, that I've become so you know, I even when I use a digital camera, it feels like an iPhone now. Like when I'm taking a photograph, it's almost like I recce with it. I look around, I shoot with it. But then when I really want to make an image, at least this is the journey I'm on right now.
Right. You go to film.
I go to my medium format. I go to my big Hasselblad. It's cumbersome. It's difficult. It's a pain in
Right.
the ass. But when I look through that viewfinder, I see a world that I relate to, or that it's you know, I've been reading a lot, and it's sort of that the pre-visualization of an image, and this happened quite a lot in Sri Lanka. I was looking through. I decided I was going to predominantly shoot Tri-X medium format.
Hmm.
I carried some 35 millimeter, and I carried some Portra 800 as well to shoot some color at those really interesting times of day. But broadly speaking, I was going to shoot landscapes and trees and nature, and I was
Right.
going to travel through. And I was so in when I would look through the viewfinder, I would sort of have a relationship with how this image is going to eventually translate because of my relationship with that particular film stock, how I've scanned it over time, so I would sort of, you know, and then my metering, how I would meter, how I would play with the frame and light and stuff. And it just, for me, what I like about that is how conscious I am
Hmm.
on how much I'm participating in the creation of an image.
Right.
You know, like my role in the creation of that image is quite intense, you know, in
Right.
that sense.
Right. It
You
is
know?
not about just clicking pictures, one after another.
Yeah. It's you know, sometimes you move 6 inches to the right and everything changes. Sometimes you move, you know, it's you know, and it's sort of, and yes, obviously. So sometimes somebody asked me the other day, you know, you're not a street photographer, are you? And I've been thinking about that, you know, because I think I clearly started out as a street photographer, you
Right.
know.
I was about to talk about
Um,
that as well.
yeah, I think it's changed for me, you know.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing, and that was one of my anxieties on this trip, because I I'm usually at my most peaceful in a sea of people or on a crowded street, you know, and that's
Right.
actually where the silence comes from for me.
Hmm.
But I was very nervous being in the middle of nature, being without people, being around, you know, like, and wondering whether I would go cuckoo, you know.
Right.
Um, but I found, I think Michael Kedder used to talk about his relationship with different trees. So he would sort of go back to Japan to photograph a tree over maybe 15 years. He'd develop a relationship with a particular tree, you know, and
Right.
things like that. So you kind
Right.
of you find different things that sort of motivate you at different times. And I think so I think, you know, at the same time, you know, within one day I was out in Colombo just towards the end of my trip, and I had some Portra 400 in my M7 in my, you know, and the light was just ridiculous. And I just got out on the street, and it was like there were pictures all over the place. Like, I mean, I felt so invigorated and so alive
Hmm.
doing that thing. So I like, you know, they both have such an important part in my life. The only thing that's happening for me right now, which is, and it is neither here nor there, it's the fact that I'm trying to work with film a little more,
Right.
because it's literally this digital, the volume of imagery that I have to go through later, the amount that I have to edit here. Again, it's all about my own spiritual relationship with the
Right.
journey.
Right.
So
Right.
the way I sit with my scanner, the way I even when I process, I don't let the lab scan for me. I just
You
get
do
the
it
negatives
yourself.
back. I do each
Right.
frame myself, and it's slow. It takes time, and it it really helps for me because my editing process is happening much more in my head,
Right.
and it's not happening by choosing this one. Is this file better than this file, better than this file, better than this? I don't know. I'm I'm having to make those decisions when I'm actually on the street.
Mhm. Right. Right. And while you are on streets, like, do you have like a set of pictures in your mind that I want to just click these many pictures, or like, do you shoot much, or you shoot like in like smaller numbers?
This is something that's changed a lot in the last, exactly, I was saying, this 3 years of lockdown, kind of like, I mean, I remember I took this trip to Varanasi, and I shot like maybe 10, 12 hours a day. I would get up at 3 a.m. I'd shoot
Right.
till about 9. I'd come back, I'd sleep, then I'd go out again at around 4, come back at around 7:38, and then I'd sleep again till 3, and then I'd go out again. And I did this every day.
Mm.
And I was digital. I was just shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. And I came, and there was, it was a great, it was, it was physically challenging. It was great to see, but I didn't come back with much. I didn't come
Right.
back, I didn't come back saying, oh, that was, because I didn't think through what I was going to do over there particularly. I didn't, I didn't, I don't know, or I was trying too hard. I'm not sure, you know.
Mm.
So I tried this particular time. So actually, in a sense, maybe all roads were preparing me for this trip, where I sat down before I left and I said, it's going to be black and white, it's going to be medium format, it's going to be landscape,
Mm.
and then you allow magic to happen. So there were
Right.
these beautiful experiences of schools and children, and the odd and some very esoteric images that sort
Right.
of came to me while I was looking for a particular thing. But I was sort of clear with what I was setting out to do. You know,
Right.
so I think it helps, and that's the problem for me with general street photography, is that
Mm.
um, you're looking for that elusive image. You're looking for that, so why do you have to go to Colombo or Cuba or here or there? You can get that elusive image outside your
House.
house, right? You don't necessarily need to go anywhere to make it. So what is your, so these are just continuous questions that one is always going to be wrestling with, you know?
Right. Right.
Do you have to travel to make that image? Do you need to,
But I guess it's about personal journey, how you want to. Yeah.
look, it was, I mean, the fact that I could even have a conversation and say, my God, Colombo felt like Havana.
Hmm.
The skies, the sea, the landscape, the colonial, I mean, the art, there was architectural aspects. I never believed in a million years that I would say that, but in my
Right.
very short time on the street, so just the fact that I can have that conversation and say, okay, so that enriches me as a person, as a conversationalist, as an
Completely.
individual, not as a photographer, but
Hmm.
as it's just an experience.
Right, right, right. And you just mentioned that somebody asked you if you are a street photographer or not. And I was going through your website and a lot of your work on Instagram as well. And I feel that the kind of photography that you do is completely different from how we see traditional street photography. Your photographs have that depth, or I would say there is a sense of stillness in them. There is a sense of mm, loneliness, aloneness, I would say, that you are always after those silent moments around you. And because, see, majority of street photographs that we see, there is so much happening in the photographs all the time, and everybody is after those moments only. But you choose to click the very silent moments around you where nothing much is happening, but still you are choosing your frame to be like that. What really goes on behind your mind while you are clicking those images?
That's a very interesting observation, and I
Right.
think I think it. I I'm always trying to emotionally relate. Okay, so it's I think it was Harry Callahan who said this beautiful line. He said, "A photograph is like a prayer," you know? And I do feel that way, you know? So when I'm making an image, it has to be reflective of my very deep internal spirit. So if it has that quality, if you're saying that it
Right.
has that, because I'm not the right person to judge that, but if you're saying that it has that quality, then I'm very very happy to hear it.
Yeah, because
Now,
those are the very, yeah.
but it's subconscious. It's subconscious.
Right.
It isn't something that I'm trying to do. I haven't articulated that and said this is what I'm going to do, right? Although I would say this, that when, you know, you do tend to sort of, there is a time, and it happens for everybody, where you'll sort of imitate your mentors, or you'll imitate, you know, so the, you know, Webb's images have these multiple people in the frame, but Rebecca's images are so silent. They're so poetic and so quiet. I found myself, you know, going to this workshop to sort of to be taught by him, but it was her work, I think, I probably resonated more with in some ways, you know. But but the point, you know, then I did so many workshops after that with so many different photographers, and it was, the only thing that I could ever come out with was that I'm operating in a very personal sphere. So what's happening to me, Vipin, right now, which is interesting because it all links up, is I'm getting the odd commission to shoot something for somebody, you know, and I'm very mindful of the fact that this is a very sacred space. I do that commercial work as an advertising filmmaker, but this work over here, if I'm hired, you're hiring me.
Right.
You're not hiring, you know what I mean? And again, it was Callahan who said, "Oh, you want a good picture? I can't tell you if it'll take a day or a year." You know, I can't tell you that. You know, I can. You can commission me to do it, but I don't know if it's going to work. You know, I don't know if it's going to. You know, so these are the sorts of things. I'm not wrestling with it particularly, or it's hugely instinctive that this part of me is sacred.
Right.
You know, and while it is for sale to some degree, right? The terms and conditions are quite extreme.
Are there. Like you mentioned it beautifully, that, you know, when it comes to the kind of work that you like doing, it is not about that they don't want like a guy with a camera only. They are wanting you, Sunhil Sippy, as personality, as a photographer.
That's the sort of argument I'm having. I've been a filmmaker for 25 years. I've been a street photographer for a good 10, 12 years. I've worked on film. I've traveled. I've educated myself. I've done feature films. Now, with that experience, you're putting me in front of something to click a shutter, right? I'm coming with that life experience to that moment, you know? And I do believe that has some value. I'm not talking about monetary value even. I'm talking about a way in which you handle the situation, or the way you navigate the situation, or the way you have the room to play within that situation.
Right.
I also think the only other thing that's very valuable in that, Vipin, is the fact that my work will probably not be imitative.
Right. True.
It probably won't be reflective of the tastes that are currently popular.
Right. And I want to ask you, like, when it comes to street photography, do you like confronting people? Because, you know, as far as street photography is concerned, I always had like one problem with street photography. I'm really aware of my own personal space, you know, whenever I'm going out, or whatever that I'm doing. And let's say if I'm roaming around in streets with camera in my hand, I always think about it, and I really ponder my thought about it, that I'm not just putting camera in front of someone's face and just clicking images. Do you think about that? Like, does it really cross your mind?
I think there are two. It's a huge question
Right.
with many layers, but it's something I've reflected on a lot
It has more
over
to
the
do with
years.
someone else's privacy.
Yeah, we'll come to that, because
Right.
there's a legal aspect, there's an ethical aspect, there's there are various aspects to this. Okay, there's also, let's go back to the core. My core belief on this is that we're recording the times we live in.
Right.
All right. And if we're recording the times we live in, then we are capturing the people who, then if we are street photographers or whatever, we are honoring that that time. Okay.
Right.
Now, so I don't think so. So if you ask me, should street photography be devoid of people because it's a breach of privacy or there's an ethical issue there? No, I disagree with that completely. I think it's a public space. I think we're on CCTV cameras 24 hours a day,
Right.
being recorded by the state. We're being, the thing I find quite amusing is the police come up to you and say, put your camera away, while 19 people are recording everything on their cell phones behind you,
Right.
and you're like, what, So I don't think privacy is as valuable or as I don't think it's a critical issue. I think we as photographers, how we navigate our streets and our subjects is very important. So, for example, with me, I'll often, one thing is 95% of the time, my subjects are aware of me. Okay. They know I'm there.
Right.
Okay. There have been occasions where they don't want to be photographed. They'll either put their hand up or they'll move or they'll say something, and I completely respect that, right? Some people are peacocks and they want to completely play to the camera. And some people are they're very, very consciously aware of my presence. I'm often standing in one place for maybe 45 minutes. So people are aware that I'm there and they don't seem to have a problem. So I think, but I have made mistakes. I have made breaches of this over the years. I've looked through doorways, through windows. I've spied into homes. I've done, I've done this, and I've not felt particularly good about it. It's thrilling. It's risky. It's amazing. But I think that between Todd Hyder and Nadav Kanda, they both did series. I mean, Todd Hyder did his houses, where he's literally driving around neighborhoods photographing people's houses. I think Nadav did a series where he was sort of looking in the windows, and you could see things inside the windows of the houses. And they're beautiful. They're absolutely stunning images. Now, I don't know the details of that series. Whether I don't think people were complicit in that. I know with Todd Hyder, I know that he just, I don't think he's capturing what he sees. But with his, they're not so much people.
Right.
So then what happens? You see, we sanitize our work. We sanitize it, and then we no longer see life.
Right.
We're seeing shapes and trees and things and that, but we're not seeing humanity. We're not seeing the humanity because we're too frightened of breaching those ethical protocols or being, invasive or, and I think, look, I think they're relevant conversations. I think they're debates that have to happen, but I don't think we should be self-censoring to the extent that we don't practice.
Right. I understand your point. But do you really think about all these things, like while you're shooting, or you're not
I do now. Right? Much more than I used to. But Vipin, it's interesting because in a sense, I was talking to an author who I've been a book I've been reading, in fact, Quarter Life. It's a phenomenal book.
Okay.
And it's all about, much of that book is about, and I was talking to the author about certain things in the book, and she was talking about the fact that whose right is it to tell which story, And I think this is the conversation that tends to come up. This conversation of privilege, this conversation of perspective or point of view, who is empowered to embrace that narrative, and who, these are the issues that are consistently being debated and played with. And I think they're very relevant conversations, Do I think, but I said, I'm going to Sri Lanka to shoot trees. And she said, I hope it's not because you're you're frightened of the streets, or that you're not supposed, that you're shying away from the street. So, for example, when I'm photographing on the street, even in Colombo, I'm waiting for the person's head to be turned. I'm waiting so that I just have one figure or something. I'm moving away from seeing, you know what I mean? I'm
understand.
getting into this sort of self-censorship kind of thing, which I don't think history is going to be kind to that, because if we don't capture the times that we're in through fashion, through hairstyles, through people, I'm looking at some of my Bombay archive from 2012, 13, and the clothes and the hairstyles are so dramatically different from today, but it's so subtle. Now, in 5 years, it'll be more pronounced. If you see, what's his name, Mitch Epstein's work on Bombay, I mean, and Akshay Mahajan and I were talking about it, he said, Mitch Epstein could have took a camera up and clicked, and any frame would have been perfect because that's the way Bombay looked. But that's the way Bombay looks now. And in 20 years from now, someone will say, when we have glass and steel and metro and, coastal road and everything, they'll see one road and say, oh my God, look, anywhere you pointed the camera, it was perfect. Or, that's the nature of the game we're in.
Right. And as far as street photography is concerned, what is your approach towards street photography? Like, how often do you go out, and how often are you clicking pictures? And when you are not clicking pictures, what exactly are you doing in at that time?
So typically, Vipin, honestly, it was very simple. I used to look at my hard drives and I used to say, when I was working commercially and I had a lot of jobs, there was no street photography. And then suddenly when there was no work, I was shooting a lot. And now what's interesting is I'm shooting a lot less often commercially. So I have a lot more time. So in that time, actually what I've spent doing in the last year, maybe, I've been really sorting out my archive, sorting out my negatives, scanning negatives from 2015 onwards, trying to look at the film work I've done in Bombay over the last 10 years and see if there's some relevance. Is there something of value in that work that I can sort of take forward? I've been trying to reflect really on what I'm doing. So I don't think it's now. So let me be very honest. When I go out on the streets, it's because I'm sort of restless. I need to calm my mind, or I'm feeling, like I'm not able to. Everything's in a spin, and then I go and I calm down.
Right.
The only thing that's bothering me, sort of in quite a serious way, is that my method has changed. So I feel like I used to go out and shoot for the sake of shooting. Now I'm a little more mindful about why I'm going, or what am I trying to achieve if I go out. Am I and so I think, and I'm glad, I'm happy that it's happening, even if it's 15, 17 years into my journey, that I'm starting to sort of be a bit more mindful about why I'm doing it. Otherwise, literally, there was no reason for it. I would do it to. If you see my book, I think one of the statements I make is I want to know where I am. It was the simplest thing in the world, that I'm living in a city and I'm absolutely devoid of understanding of where it is that I am. I travel from A to B, or I'm in a car, I'm in here, even if I'm I don't know anything about where I am. So I think my motivation around that time was to really understand the city that I'm living in. So it was very broad. It allowed me to do anything that I wanted to do. Today, like, for example, I've got a little bit of an obsession with the Eastern Seaboard, with which I've photographed a lot in my book also. But I realized that I had a big archive of medium format negatives of that area, from Banduk, Trombay, Wadala, Darukana, that whole side of the city. And now I look at that work, I go back and I keep on repeating within that thing, because I'm not suggesting because, tomorrow that place will be developed and buildings will come and something will be knocked down and the Sivri cement sheds will be gone, and that, but I like the fact that I am capturing it in my own special way over this time. And do I think it has a value as a document? Yes, I think it could have some value. So I'm a little more thoughtful about why I'm doing something, or if I'm working towards something.
Right, right. And does it happen with you that you go back to your old photographs? Because that happens with me after a while, like
Oh
few
yeah,
months, few
yeah, yeah,
months,
yeah.
like.
You have no, no, no. You have. I mean, it's that. This is why I always talk about the absolute critical importance of archiving.
Hmm.
You know, so I think who I think is the most incredible archivist is probably Suresh Nanganathan. If you look at the fact that he can find everyone dressed in red, or everyone, it's like, I think he puts metadata. I think he has to, like, for me, I don't even use Lightroom. Everything is in folders. I have to hunt.
Right.
In the middle of the night, I'm through the night looking for things, and I can't find anything. But I think that process is itself, in fact, like street photography. You're walking on the streets looking for a photograph, even looking through your archives and looking for something is similar to, because also your eye changes, right? Something that you thought was rubbish 5 years ago,
Right.
you in a different way today, right?
Right. Yes. And while I was like researching about you and studying about you, one thing that really fascinated me about you is the choices that you have made. And by choices, it has, like, it's not just about the kind of images you make, but it is about the kind of choice of getting into photography in itself was quite philosophical to me from like my perspective. You have been like doing TV commercials from a very long time now, and although I understand that there is a lot that goes on behind that as well, but still from a viewer's perspective, it is all about glitz and glamour and all the magical stuff on screen. And you have been doing that quite successfully from a very long time, but still you chose to get into photography which is completely, if it has no intersection with TV commercials and nothing related to each other, but still you chooses to do that. I want to understand what really compelled you to choose photography. Like, does it happen because at some point of time you might have felt like some sort of apathy towards TV commercials, or you got bored of it, that's why you chose photography? Because one thing is for sure, that it has more to do with soul searching for you.
So, very good question. I mean, I remember in 2010 I had won the Garnier account. I was doing a lot of work for Garnier, and I was doing it for the French. It was very prestigious. It was a real honor for an Indian director to be working on that brand, and I was building some pretty large sets in studios, but I was shooting, at the end of the day, I was shooting skin, I was shooting faces this close, and I would be telling a 30-second story, but here, just turn here, and I remember, and I was getting good at it,
right,
and I was getting more of that work, and it was, while I felt a huge sort of sense of success at having won those accounts and working on such prestigious jobs, there was a part of me that felt that I had lost my relationship with reality in some way. So around 2010, 9-10 is when I actually began this. But the real turning point where it went serious was 2012, when I had this accident and I lost the heel of my left foot in an accident while shooting a commercial in Delhi. And that is very ironic, that losing part of my foot is what made me walk streets. But it was literally, it was like, and it was, you're right, it's a soul searching journey, it's a spiritual journey. And I had to get myself fit again, and there was a joint. See, while my whole heel had been reconstructed, the sort of angle of the ankle would not move. It was very stiff. So I had to. I found walking was the most effective way to kind of loosen that. So I would walk and walk and walk and walk and walk, and that was what I would do to try to heal. It was very painful. It still is painful. It's still very painful. But but I think that was when I kind of but it definitely there was a big shift in me and taking it much more seriously, you know.
Mm-hmm. And where do you draw inspiration from, like apart from photography as well? What kind of movies do you watch? What kind of books do you read? Apart from photography books, I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I think I was definitely a better fiction reader in earlier times. I think social media has really affected one's attention span, which is why I'm very happy that I'm nearly through Quarter Life. I'm nearly done. It's such a fabulous book
Hmm.
um, to read fiction. But I think fiction's very important. I think
Hmm.
for for me as a photographer, although I don't read enough of it anymore, but it's the ideas and thoughts and feelings and things you have, that are provoked by fiction is quite incredible, because you have these kind of the images that come to you through
Hmm.
fiction are pretty evocative and pretty powerful. It's just that I think um it's not, but I don't work in that. It's not like everything is subconscious and random. So the fact
Hmm.
is that, yes, the more you do that, the better, the more refined maybe your thoughts and your eye will be. But I don't. It's not prescriptive. The one thing that I actually have been finding interesting of late is collaborations.
Hmm.
You know, so I feel like sometimes I feel that I should collaborate
Hmm.
more. That my skill is here and someone's skill may be there.
Hmm.
And actually bringing these two things together can make something much more effective.
Right. Right.
So that's something I'm thinking about, because I think I'm not good at refining what I'm trying to do. What I do is, after 5 years, I look back at something and I try to bring it together and say, oh, there's something here, you know.
Okay.
But as opposed to, say, for example, I'm collaborating with Bombay Wala
Hmm.
on some work for her, and I'm photographing for her. Then when I'm seeing the way she's editing and the way she's choosing the pictures, I'm looking at
Hmm.
my work in a completely different way.
Hmm.
I'm saying, gosh, I didn't think that was a very good picture, but no, look at the story you're telling with that.
Hmm.
You know. So
Right.
I
Right.
think this type of stuff helps me to see bigger pictures in my own work. But yes, I feel that there's a lot of solitude in me, and in sense loneliness with my own work, and I sometimes can't find my way through it.
Hmm.
So collaborations, I think, are really important for me.
Right. And their perspective also comes in. That is what
Exactly,
matters.
because you see the thing is, you can take a line from a novel, you can take literally one line, and that could be your anchor point for an
True.
entire series, right?
True.
But how that book made you feel
Hmm.
would be the overarching sort of emotion. And I mean, I remember reading Malcolm Lowry's Under the Volcano while I was in Mexico, because it
Hmm.
was sort of all set in Mexico, and it was a tough read. It was slow. But it left such an impact on me in terms of the heat and the streets and the way it was described about this drunk man walking through,
Hmm.
Mexico.
Hmm.
And it was like it left such a feeling in me about the the country, but it didn't relate particularly to what I was necessarily doing there, but it created a feeling.
Right. 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 And you just talked about Mexico, and you have like photographed like over the place, so many different places and so many different countries. If you have to compare India with other countries, like with keeping street photography in mind, what kind of differences do you see when it comes to street photography, like clicking pictures in some other country, let's say in Mexico, or let's say in Mexico, or let's say in London, and in India, Mumbai, so to speak? What kind of differences do you see, and how do you change your approach towards shooting?
It's I don't change my approach at all,
Okay.
and that can get me into trouble,
Hmm.
because obviously in somewhere like London or in Paris, you get into a lot more trouble than you were. You see, the thing is, in India, this is why the ethical issue becomes quite important in India, because people in some ways are so powerless to sort of respond or say anything. They're too busy with their day. They can't be bothered. They just getting on with what they need to get on with for the day. They're really not, especially laborers and stuff. They're not like,
Right.
they're not interested in what you're doing, But if you go on to, and I don't know if that translates. I mean, you won't find a ship breaking yard in the UK, or you won't even find coal miners in the UK anymore. You won't even find, So if you want to get into sort of, if you even look at Salgado, I mean, look at the places he was photographing, all places where you could access, where people were like, they were.
They're not even in a position to say anything.
They're not in a position to say anything. So I think I don't change my approach. Wherever I am. The only thing that happened, I think, for me over the years is I moved away from the rangefinder, the kind of shooting from the hip on the street, and I moved to that square format, medium format film thing that helped me to sort of slow down and make pictures a bit more mindfully and kind of know what I was doing, and and that's the only difference I think that's happened for me, but that would translate across all places that I photographed. The only thing that's always frustrating is that traveling and photography is lovely for yourself. It's lovely for your soul. It's lovely for your own perspective on life. But in terms of photography, what are you doing? You're scratching the surface of something. So it's much nicer to say, okay, I love trees or I love landscape. And this is work that's been made all over the world in the same format, but the tree in Mexico, or the tree in Japan, or the tree in London, or the tree in Sri Lanka, they all have their own special beauty or something that binds something together. But what the only thing that can really give you value on an archive like that is history, right? And remember, we're working at a time where everyone's making pictures, so what's making ours more special than somebody else's? I mean, how do we, So I do remember, I mean, I don't know if you've reflected on this, but when I started in 2009 or 10, I didn't even know it existed as a genre. I didn't even know that, I was so oblivious to the fact that, this is what people did, But I also think it mushroomed. I think with the rise of the Fuji cameras and the digital, I think the DSLRs kind of started dying off.
Right.
But in a sense, street photography was the domain of the people who could buy Leicas, or people who could afford cameras like that. And then otherwise you had a DSLR, which was too bulky and heavy and big to carry on the street. So that automatically sort of reduced the number of people who could do it. And then when Fuji brought their series of cameras in, and Ricoh brought their cameras in, I think it really democratized the street and got a lot more people interested in the street, and they were able to sort of to do it. I mean, the only thing I'd say is that, to what end? I mean, I think a lot of the younger photographers are social media stars. They have monumental followings and absolutely love their work, but the curation is tricky. There's thousands of pictures. So if you see my website, there's a section called Home in the World, and I've been, there's my pictures from around the world. There must be 22 pictures there, and I still go back. And when I go back to the site, I quite like looking at it, because it's like, I do need to put some more things in, but I think I quite like the fact that there's few.
Right. And it's not just about photographs. Like when I was like going through your website, you have like a different way of curating pictures and showing them on website. Like you have added diptychs are there, and then panoramas are also there. I don't see such kind of images, and the way you presented your images on a website, like, I don't see it with quite often.
I mean, it took more than a year to do it, and then I was also trying to do, which is a very dangerous thing. I tried to do a website that was coded in my own way, so that it's not a Squarespace, or it's not bought off a rack, and it's made it very challenging to update, or so I now need to review, probably in the next year, review what I've been doing, and
Mhm.
maybe make some significant changes on the
Mhm.
site. But yeah, but I think in that sense, again, it's sort of something that makes me stop, reflect, understand why I'm putting these images and what they mean, and then put them up. But it is also frustrating, because if people ask, oh, where can I see your work, and they say, well, it's on the site, but I'm shooting all the time, so there's a whole ton of work which is definitely not going to be there. But this is the journey.
Right. True. 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 Right. And in one of your interviews, you said that black and white because this is the question that I'm asking you, because I myself, I'm into black and white photography. I hardly shoot
Mm,
colors. And you
mm.
mentioned that black and white photography is more challenging than shooting colors. You
Ah, oh God, I'm gonna get into trouble for that. And Prabhupada Das Gupta used to say black and white photography is easier, is more forgiving than color. I think, let me let me qualify that statement.
right, right, right.
Um, I think printing black and white is very, very challenging.
It's
Okay,
tricky.
and if you see my book, and in fact somebody was chatting with me on Instagram this morning about it, you see the images were made over 10 years in all different types of light,
Hmm.
and they were edited based on content, not not on light or style, or whatever. So I had to find, it was a very difficult book to print, because I had to, if I went for the blacks in a particular way,
Hmm.
then in other images it would just get too dark, and someday would get too burnt. And so I had to find this kind of muddy evenness to
Hmm.
everything that would allow the the paper texture sort of helps for the story that I was telling in that
Right,
particular
right.
book. So that's why I found black and white extremely challenging.
Hmm.
Now, in terms of shooting black and white versus color, I don't think I would say that. I think it's just that now I'm a little, so the act of putting a roll of color film, or a 400 ASA film, or an 800 ASA film, or a 160 ASA film
Hmm.
into your camera tells you what you're intending to do.
Right.
Okay. Now, I didn't used to do that so much before, but for example, I did a test roll of 3200 T-Max the other day,
Hmm.
and I just shot some stuff in the rain, and I was just shooting. I said, this is going to be ridiculously grainy and pathetic, like what? And I looked at the picture. I was very, very happy with what was coming out on that beautiful stock, and I said, gosh, that's the way I would like to shoot in the monsoon. I will shoot on T-Max 3200, and it really is very, very beautiful. But
Hmm.
I'm saying the decision-making process. So, for example, if I'm going to shoot black and white,
Hmm.
then I load black and white, and I go out and approach life in that
Like,
sense. If I'm going to shoot Portrait 800, I'm probably going to go out at 4 in the morning, or at 7 in the evening.
right.
If I'm going to shoot, Portrait 400, it'll probably be a sunny day. You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I'll probably make these decisions a little. And what happens, Vipin, what I find and it's taken me a very long time. I'm quite
Hmm.
slow.
Hmm.
It's taken me a very long time to get to this point where I say, um, okay, this is the way I'm going to do it. And then what tends to happen
Hmm.
is my strike rate increases. I've gone out knowing what I'm intending to do.
Right.
I mean, not always. It doesn't always work, obviously, but there's as opposed to just chucking whatever you have in your bag and going out and just shooting all day and coming back home,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
There's some relationship between your thought process, what's going into your bag, why it's going into your bag, and what you're coming back with. Now I'm using film as a sort of check and balance, but
Hmm.
I think you can. I mean, the evolved me would be able to do this digitally as well. I'd
Right.
be able to say, okay, I'm going to set my camera to 800 ASA. I'm going to go out at this time, and I'm going to shoot, and I'm going to, and I'm not going to
Hmm.
keep going like this,
Right. Right. Right.
I'm,
Right.
and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to shoot black, and so I'm sure I can bring myself to train myself to shoot. And I think this is also part of the exercise, Vip, and I think I'm probably going through this really challenging experience.
Right.
I mean, you don't know what it was like in Sri Lanka. The back of the car had 3 different backs of my Hasselblad. They had 4 lenses on there. There was the M. There was this. There was films. And I'd get out and I'd plug, and then my light meter, and it was all so difficult, right? That, and carrying it through the airport, traveling with all that gear, it's a nightmare,
Right.
And then I thought, maybe it's just training. Maybe now I can go out with a digital rangefinder in my hand and behave.
Yeah, I understand. Right. And so, do you shoot digital, or you are on shooting in film now?
No. I shoot digital. I've shot. Yeah. A lot. It's just that recently I've kind of slowed down on it because I think I'm trying to retrain myself at the moment.
Right. So basically, what you mentioned over here is has more to do with the discipline of clicking pictures.
Yes. And how your mind and body and spirit is relating to the world around you, right? In a mindful fashion, right? More than anything, I think,
Right. And right, I understand your point. And now I want to talk about your book, The Opium of Time. First of all, I want to ask you, how did you come up with that name? The Opium of Time.
I'll tell you, it was called A Disappearing City initially, right? And then a friend of mine said she felt it was a bit negative, or she felt that the city is not disappearing. She said in your book, the city is so alive, and though both titles relate to each other in some ways, because Opium of Time, I was reading W.G. Sebald's The Rings of Saturn, which I found to be quite a very challenging book, and I'm a very slow reader. But I remember reading these 2 lines, and they were actually maybe 20, 30 pages apart. And I remember on every new thing there lies on every new thing lies the shadow of annihilation. There is no antidote to the opium of time. And it was Bombay. On every new thing lies a shadow of annihilation. I mean, just look around us,
Right.
And then the opium of time was sort of. So the way I tended to describe it was that I think when I look back at the imagery, it was, and a lot of people have said this to me, sort of, you don't know when the pictures were made. So there's this sort of temporal haze. Was this 2017? Was it 16? Was it 1965? Was it, when was the image made? And I think that subconsciously, whether that was going on with me or not in the way I was approaching the imagery, I'm not sure. But the idea that it's this haze, the idea that you're not making a temporal statement.
There is timeless quality those images.
Yeah. So the downside of it, okay. Like if you look at Eggleston's work or Stephen Shaw or whatever, they've captured a particular, very specific time, and you see that. The only way this will have a specific timestamp on it is because it is modern, actually, but it doesn't feel new. So, like if you see Suni's book, Home and the City, it's very much a city of that time, even I think she's working on something. You see her Instagram, she's putting a lot of pictures of Marine Drive shot in the 80s. It's very clearly of that time. I think mine is not of that. It's not making a statement on the time the pictures were made.
So to be right.
Yeah. So in that sense, we have to see how. We'll only know in time how kind history is to it. When you open the book in 10 years, does it make you feel anything? Are you reminded of the city? The only thing that I do get from people who see the book or who enjoy the book are that they say that they're in the city, they're in it every day, and they don't see anything. It's revealing the city so that they never see,
Right.
So that was a very nice thing to hear, from people. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most I can say on the subject.
But how did you thought of like uh, doing a book? Like, was it always in your mind or something really?
Oh no, so many people were hassling me to do it, and I was like,
Hmm.
no, 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 really, really, really. And then I was, I thought, okay, let's, again, it was, I don't know if it was an ego thing, but there was a part of me thinking that, oh, I'm doing this special thing that nobody else is doing, I didn't realize that so many people are doing it.
Hmm.
And in some ways, it's a gift to myself. It was an investment in myself, a gift to say, you know, um, when so much. So this is a very important point. Okay,
Hmm.
um, I've made 2 feature films, and I've made, I don't know, hundreds of commercials. Right?
Snip and Noor.
Um, yeah, and when in my second experience with features, I thought that I was expressing myself, but I realized I was actually controlled by so many other factors that
Right.
and I'll tell you the thing that really, I think, hit me later after the book was published. And this
Hmm.
is a very strange irony, I find, in some ways. Um, when people criticize the book, or if they don't like the book, or if they bitch about the book or say anything about the book, it's water off a duck's back to me. It doesn't hurt me in
Hmm.
any way, because from first page to last page, from every single thing has been my decision, my choice.
Right.
I know the flaws, I know where the shortcomings are, I know everything that's good and bad about it, and each decision has been mine.
Right.
So I own it. I have no publisher to blame. I have nobody to scream at. I have nobody to. So I feel it's strangely empowering. But in a feature or in a commercial or any of those other things, there are so many people involved in the journey. But it's ironic that when people criticize that, I feel so much pain, or I feel so sensitive, right?
Hmm.
Because, oh, but I couldn't do that, and I should have done that. And I know, you have all these excuses coming to your
Right.
mouth, but nobody has any interest in your excuses. This is
Hmm.
it, right? So this is it for the book. This is it, and I'm very. I mean, I don't care if you don't like it. You don't have to like it.
Right. Right.
But it's honest to what I was trying to do. So in that sense, it was a gift to myself after working for 20, 25 years. I said, let me do this one thing that, and let's be very honest, Vipin, for me, it's been a huge leap forward since one of the main things of getting it done and over with was that I closed a chapter, in
Hmm.
a sense, on that style of work.
Hmm. Right.
Otherwise, all I'm doing is regurgitating these pictures and saying, "Oh, look at this archive! Look, I got to do this. I got to do that. I
Right.
got to
Right.
do
Right.
something with it." Right now that it's done, it's over. I can move on. I think.
And do you think does it have anything to do with leaving legacy behind of your work?
Uh,
Do you think about such
yes, I mean,
things?
yeah, I do. I do sometimes, right? I do think about it, from the point of view that, what might you be remembered by? But it's a bit narcissistic sometimes to think about that. But it is, no, it is. It is. I mean, it does cross your mind,
Right.
um, how 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 much how important that aspect is debatable, but it's definitely, there's probably something there. The only thing is this, Vipin, we all want validation. So tomorrow, if I'm self-publishing, I'm self-distributing, I'm doing it on my own, you get that sense of, oh, you want validation, so you want a publisher, you want Loose Joints or Stanley Barker or Ghost, or you want
Mm-hmm.
Aperture, you want one of these guys to pick you up and say, we're going to do it, but it's unlikely. It's hard. There are a lot of people out there.
Hmm.
There's a lot of work out there. So it's, I love my publisher, Pictor, Padmini Michandani, who's actually, I've worked with her for many years, and she's done so many books. She's not a photography book person, but she's done so many books. She helped me so much with this project.
Right.
I like that collaboration because the thing is with this, she was just literally a guide, but I was distributing. Literally, my house was full of boxes, and I would pack each one and ship each one, like most self-published books are. But she helped to nurture it in many ways, and I would collaborate that way again. Going to a bigger publisher, is it maybe if something interesting comes together, maybe there will be interest. I'm not holding my breath for it,
Right.
It'd be lovely, but I'm not sure,
Right. You mentioned narcissism, the word narcissism here. And I just want to refer to the same movie, Kodachrome, again. There was this scene where Ed Harris's character like says that no art worth a damn has ever created out of happiness. It's narcissism, rage, sex. These are the driving engines of every artist.
The honesty of that, I don't think it is that in total, right? I think that is definitely an aspect, but there are so many. But the critical thing that I keep coming back to is your relationship with your spirit, and that's it. Because you can receive criticism that tells you that your work is like this or it should be like that, and if I actually respond, I'm doing a disservice to myself. I can reflect.
Right.
I can reflect and process and consider. But if I respond, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't listen, or doesn't mean that my ego's so big that I, whatever. Ed Harris's character was basically a Steve McCurry, wasn't he? I mean, he was, he was, and Steve McCurry is probably the most lambasted contemporary, photographer today. But what was his thing? He wanted to travel the world and make pictures. There was nothing wrong with that. He just happened to be a white male,
Right.
If he was of a different, and this is look, these are relevant questions, but these are the times we live in. Those are the times he was living in. These are the times we're living in now. It's going to change.
Right.
You can't argue with the beauty of his pictures. You can't argue with his dedication to his journey. You can't argue with those things. I mean, they're very authentic. You can argue politically or that he's this race and that. You can have that conversation for the rest of your life, but it doesn't change the work that he's done over 50, 60 years.
Right.
You can't throw it in the bin. I mean, you can.
No, we can't.
You can argue it and have drinks and bitch him out and talk him into the ground and say whatever you want, but you can't dismiss a body of work like that.
Right. I understand. It was lovely talking to you. I mean, it's around 12 now. I think you have to go somewhere. So
no, I just, the only thing I was saying, we've talked about so many things, and I've recently. No, nothing. I'm just thinking of so much new work I've been looking at and new books that have been really, really been inspiring me recently.
Right.
So I just wanted to maybe just spend a couple of minutes talking about a few things that I've been been looking at. I mean, I've got them with me, but Matt Black's American Geography. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a real, a beautifully printed book, and Mark Powers, the shipping forecast. I don't know if you've seen that book.
I've heard about Matt Black, but not the other one.
Mark Powers, the shipping forecast. It's a real beauty. I have it here, in fact. That book. I mean, once in a while, books come that really kind of, and it's in that lovely square format of.
Wow, this is beautiful.
It's a real beauty, this book. And again, I love it because I think I love the squares,
Right.
But I loved this. This is something recently that really had quite an impact on me, Otherwise, I was always looking at the sort of the the Harry Gruyères or the Alex Webbs or the
Right.
that particular type of street photography, and I started looking at slightly more I don't know, different work, I guess. But so it was just I never really touched on so much what's influencing me at the moment. But it's not. It's again, it doesn't change your spirit, does it?
Right. I understand. And like, do you have any plans for like shooting more feature films?
Not really. In fact, I was approached by a company, quite a major company, and I was very intrigued by this conversation. They asked me to have a meeting, and in fact, it was a producer who's based out of London had seen my book and had loved. And in fact, this is actually quite. Do we have time?
Yeah. Please go on.
I have about 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
The book was a friend of mine, Nikhil Advani, had bought the book and had given it to all the channel heads. So in one of the studios, there was a guy working there, Deepak Sehgal, who would take the book and put it on the table whenever anyone came in talking about shooting Bombay or a series on Bombay.
Okay.
He'd put the book on the table and say, "This is, look at this is the city." And there was a gentleman from the UK who was here, who was developing a show, and he looked at the book and he went crazy. And then I happened to be in Soho House the same day, and he was there. And then his producer, they saw me, and they ended up sitting with me, and they've been talking to me about shooting an element of a series. So I thought, and I realized when they were asking me, I thought, God, are they asking me to direct a show? And then or they asking me to be the cinematographer, and I was like, this is very weird. And when I met them, it was a lovely conversation. They said they need to infuse the stylistic quality of my book into certain sequences in the show, and would I shoot it? I said, would I do? And I said that would be the most amazing thing, to have that freedom to shoot some elements of the city for a bigger show, But I realized that it was a really difficult thing, Vipin, because I was like listening to them and I was thinking, and I thought, gosh, if you asked me to direct a series, I'd fall off my chair. I'd be too exhausted. I wouldn't even know where to start. My skills changed. I don't think it's what I want to do. And I had to really think about it when I was out. And then when they said, "Oh, you can shoot these elements, almost like a B-roll or second unit or something like this," I suddenly got really excited. I said, as long as I have no crew, as long as there's nobody telling me what to do, as long as there's no,
you're on your own,
I'll do
completely.
It. If you want what's in that book, then it's me as a solo show. That's it.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah, that's it. So then that was a lovely thing. And so I think in fact, on Sri Lanka, I reflected a lot about whether I want to get back into a bigger format or something. And I actually think the answer is no. There's so much joy at this stage of life. It's about joy. It's not about, there's nothing to prove. It's about proving stuff to myself really right now.
Right.
Just
True.
And ultimately to be as happy as you can be in every day that you live.
Right. And as far as I see your work, I would love to see a documentary shot by you. I think the kind
that's
of
yeah, that's a very, very good point, and it's something that really appeals to me.
Yeah, that
the idea
mood
of
and the
shooting,
mood and everything. Yeah.
I hear you, and I think that's something that would be incredible to do. To shoot, but not direct.
Shoot.
I'd love to shoot it. That's where I talk about the collaboration. That's where I think I'm. And actually, when I was in university, I was a very good cinematographer for all my student friends, and I was a terrible director. I wasn't good. But I was brilliant. We gave me the camera and I was doing all kinds of things, But so I do feel bad, but not like, again, I don't think my qualification, at this stage of my life, my qualification is definitely not for a series or a feature film, but I think docu-type stuff would be really interesting to look at.
Yeah, and I would love to collab with you on a documentary. It would be lovely.
Well, we'll talk about it. Yeah,
sure. And it was lovely talking to you. It was lovely talking
It's
to you.
been really, really nice. A lovely, lovely start to a Sunday.
Right. I mean, we have been planning to do it from a very long time, and finally we get a
I
chance.
know.
Yeah.
It's been a challenging year. I've had
Right.
many, many things. My mother's health, I've had other
Mm.
things going on, and I just needed to get myself into the right headspace to have this
Right.
conversation. Unfortunately, I think it's been good. I've been feeling really good today. So
Amazing. Amazing. I hope things are well at home as well now.
yeah. Better. Yeah.
Okay. Great. We can
Yeah.
wrap it up now. So thank you.
Okay. Okay, Vipin.
It
Thank
was
you.
lovely
Thanks so
talking to
much.
you. Bye. Take
Yeah.
care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.